Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns reached the bye week with a 27-10 loss to the Chargers on Sunday. On Tuesday, Za'Darius Smith was traded to the Lions, and on Wednesday, General Manager Andrew Berry talked to reporters without saying much. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of Go, the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm good, bud.
Yeah, well, I think do you remember Star Wars, that line? Are you a Star Wars guy?
You know what? I'm an old Star Wars guy. I'm not a kept up on Star Wars guy. So if we're
Okay.
going the
Yeah.
original three, I'm good.
Yeah. All right. Well, then this line was from the original three. Do you remember the line? It's a trap. It's a trap. It-
Yes.
well, that's exactly what the Browns did to their fan base. Trapped them into thinking after that Ravens win that it could possibly be different, but it was not. And it just goes to show you that something was happening inside that building, as we had talked about divine intervention, because it was back to normal this past Sunday.
You're right, Chud. And I can't, I think it's important to try to figure out what's broken about the offense. And I still believe Deshaun Watson was a big part of what was broken, but he obviously isn't all that was wrong with the offense. And we saw that because Jameis Winston was at the controls against the Chargers, and the Chargers still made it really hard on the Browns, or the Browns made it hard on themselves, whatever it was, to move the ball up and down the field. They scored 3 points until the last 44 seconds when Cedric Tillman gets the garbage touchdown. And it was just what we'd seen for the first 7 games with Deshaun Watson as a starter, not converting third downs, not being able to find guys open. And the protection was, in my opinion, the protection was better. Jameis Winston had time to throw. He was sacked 6 times. I thought on 4 or 5 of those, he had time. He just couldn't find guys open. And I don't know if that's a scheme issue where the Browns aren't scheming guys open. I don't know if it's a receiver issue where the receivers aren't getting open. Maybe the Chargers had a good plan. Maybe Winston's not seeing guys, but it felt similar to what the problems the Browns had earlier in the year with Watson at quarterback. I saw one of those next gen stats that every time Nick Chubb ran the ball, it was against a light box, meaning there's not extra defenders at the line of scrimmage, and he averaged less than 3 yards a carry. So there's issues with the run game, whether it's Chubb coming off the injury, or the offensive line isn't creating space, or the scheme's not as good as it used to be. Whatever it is, there's just a lot of issues on offense, and they showed up again. And then on top of that, Winston throws 3 picks. So when they finally do move the ball at the beginning of the third quarter, and you have a chance to get back in the game, Cedric Tillman drops the ball on about the 2 yard line, probably scores. And then on the next play or 2 plays later, Winston throws a pick into the end zone. It was a great play by the defense, but it's still not a good enough throw and a pick. And then he follows that up with 2 later. The Browns are desperately trying to come back. So you're right, just too many issues, and a lot of them on offense, but not all of them, because the defense had its fair share of mistakes too.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to disagree with you though a little
Okay.
bit.
Good.
I'm in one aspect, and I think it's a little more clear than trying to figure it out. I think I have the answer, and it's pretty simple. I do think it still lies on Deshaun Watson. And we always talk about, because Scott, we can't just change our mind every week. Last week
Yeah.
we said, oh, look at the difference when you have good quarterback play, right?
Right.
So to me, the answer lies in, we always know and knew Jameis Winston was hit or miss. That's why he's a backup, because he has shown you that he can on certain weeks be a starter. He's even said it in post game after he won. He's like, when he makes great plays, when he's at his best, he's a good starting quarterback in the NFL. Problem is, when he's not, and he's inconsistent. So he threw the 3 picks. You didn't get the Jameis you got the week earlier. We saw what the offense could do with Joe Flacco. We saw what the offense could do with good Jameis. We've seen what bad Jameis gives you, and we've seen what Deshaun Watson gives you for the most part. Not all the time, but for the most part. So to me, it's pretty clear if you have a great or above average or awesome starting quarterback in the NFL, I think the offense can get the job done under Stefanski. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I love that point, Chud. I think you're right. If the quarterback plays well, the offense is going to be really good. Now, but I think you can say that about most systems in the offense. So I don't want to take all the responsibility off of Stefanski. So yes, if your quarterback plays great, the offense is going to play great. And I think the system does give the quarterback a chance to play great football. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But you also have to win games when you don't have great quarterback play. That's how this league works. Not everybody has Patrick Mahomes. The Steelers are winning games with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Now, you can make, I don't know how great they're playing, and I don't think they're playing great. I'm sure they're playing better than Watson and Winston have. But you get my point that you have to figure out a way to win games, even if you don't get great quarterback play. And I feel like there's been a change from the first four Stefanski years to this year when it comes to that. I think it's just harder. I think everything is more difficult. And I don't know if that's because they got rid of coordinator Alex Van Pelt and Bill Callahan's no longer here and the rest of those offensive changes. So I don't know if that's part of it. I don't know if now it's, Stefanski's not calling the plays. Whatever it is, your point is perfectly well taken. And if they had a quarterback, we'd be having a different discussion about everything. A good, consistent starting quarterback. But I do think there's an issue that goes beyond that.
Yeah. What was the difference with Jameis this past week from the first time around? On his interceptions, and I didn't break them down in slow mo, but just watching them happen, I feel like two of them were bad. One I thought was just a really good defensive play in the end zone. I thought anyway. What do you think? What was the difference?
Yeah, I thought the first one was a great defensive play. He said he still needs to throw it higher. The second one looked a lot like, I think it was a DTR pick from the end of that Bengals game where Elijah Moore doesn't turn around and maybe said Tillman doesn't run the right route. But to answer your question, the difference in Jameis Winston is I think the Chargers muddied the picture for him. Against the Ravens blitzed a lot. The Browns figured out a way to handle the blitz, and it made the picture clear for Winston, and it made the decisions easy. And the Chargers didn't do that. And whether that's they dropped a bunch of guys in coverage and dared the Browns to run the ball, and the Browns couldn't do it, and there's a lot of bodies, and that made it tough on Winston, or they had a good disguise that made it tough on Winston. I know Cedric Tillman talked about they tried to take away his in-breaking routes, the slants and the in routes that he had success on in the previous two games, and whatever. Then you have to adjust off of that as a scheme, as a receiver. I just think because I thought Winston had time, like I mentioned earlier. So I think it was the Chargers did a good job, and Winston / the Browns didn't do a good enough job countering that and giving him easy options. Or he missed those options, right? I don't know that answer. I don't know if there were guys running open. I tried to ask Stefanski, and he didn't answer me. So either he just didn't see the guys running open, or the Chargers made it more difficult. And that's what they do. I mean, they're a good defense. They lead the league in points per game. We talked about it last week. It was going to be a close game. Or if the Browns are going to win, I thought it was going to be a close game. And the mistakes took away the chance for it to be a close game. It was never going to be super pretty, but you throw 3 picks, and then it becomes, you have 3 points until 44 seconds left.
Real quick, I don't spend a lot of time on this, but are you concerned about Nick Chubb, or do you think he's going to continue to still get back to, possibly be the Nick Chubb that we always knew, or do you think that it's just going to be too much to overcome?
Concerned, not ready to rule it out that he'll be back to the Nick Chubb. I thought week 2 was encouraging. I thought week 3 was discouraging. And maybe it's rust, that he just hasn't played in a long time. I thought there was 1 3rd and short, and I'm not a professional running back. I thought he missed the hole. If he cuts it up, they probably get a first down. Instead, it turns into 4th down, and I don't think they get it, or I don't remember the exact sequence, but I remember watching it 3rd down, and he tries to move it outside. I was like, ooh, if he cuts it up there. So I think there's a little hesitancy. The vision's probably not what it used to be. And the vision will come back, right? That's not a knee issue. So that could just be a haven't played a lot of games in the last, 14 months. So I'm not ready to rule him to say that he's not going to be the same player, Chud. But we've talked about this. I always had those doubts, and those doubts came back against the Chargers when they had been lessened against the Ravens.
All right, let's move to the defense now. What is going on in the secondary where they've always talked about how they think they're one of the better defensive backfields in the NFL? But boy, those blown coverages, that was a bad day for them.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And we talk about the offense all we want, and those are all legitimate points. The game's different if you don't give up two easy touchdowns, right? The game feels different. Jameis Winston doesn't feel the same pressure. You can try to run the ball longer. All those things change. And the first play, the first touchdown, it's 3rd and 21. Like, there's no way that should happen. And it turns at the most, or at the least, it's a 4-point play. You get off the field, the Chargers kick a field goal. They were in good field position to begin with because of a 50-plus yard punt return. And then it would have been a success for the defense. Get off the field, give up 3 points. Instead, it's Denzel Ward, Juan Thornhill, one of them screwed up. Or else it was a great play call that caught the Browns in a bad coverage. But even then, the guy's not going to be running that wide open. So miscommunication between those two guys. Ward took responsibility. I watched it. Feels like Ward probably should go with the guy down the field and give up the short pass, especially at 3rd and 21. But so that's, a 4-point swing or whatever it is. And then at least a 4-point swing. And then the 66-yarder, it's 3rd and 6. He should be getting the ball back. The defense has been good on 3rd down. And, Ward takes the short guy again. Thornhill's in the middle of the field. Again, the dumb miscommunication, which I hate that term because it feels like it just covers too much, right? It's a miscommunication. It needs to be more. It feels like it should be more specific. In this business, you want to be specific. You want to blame a guy, and like I said, Ward took responsibility. Thornhill said, "No, it's not all on Ward." Rodney McLeod tried to break it down for us on Monday, and he said when a guy goes in motion, they check into a different defense, and then there's like a second motion and a second check, and one of the guys didn't get it, whether it's Ward or Thornhill. And so that at least makes sense why it happened, but it can't happen. It can't happen in November. I don't know if you remember this, Chud, when Jim Schwartz, the coordinator, got hired, he made a big point of saying, because under Joe Woods, you would see the Browns give up a play like that, the former defensive coordinator, and they'd look at each other with their arms kind of shrugged and raised, and Schwartz like, you're not going to see that from my guys. Well, I don't know if they made that gesture to each other, but it was the same thing. And it just can't have it happen, and they're huge plays in the game. And again, like that's Denzel Ward's had an outstanding year, leads the league in passes defense. But when you give up 2 touchdowns like that, it changes everything about the game. You can't act like you're the best secondary in the league like they think they are. Even though it's not a talent thing, it's a communication or a mental thing or whatever it is. It just can't happen.
Yeah. Myles Garrett, though, they were putting pressure on. They got plenty of sacks. So, like you said, a couple of blown calls, it turns into a blowout. And by no means did we ever think they were in the game. They didn't score a touchdown at the end of the game, but, there were because of turnovers and, I guess what I'm saying is, it could have been a different story. It really could have.
Yeah, it could have been the kind of game that I'm sure Kevin Stefanski thought they would have to play to win, which is 21-20 or 17-16 or 14-13. Whatever in his head he had to plan for the game, I don't think he thought they were going to go in and score 30 against this defense. So you need your defense to live up to that. You need your special teams to live up to that, which means not giving up a 50-yard kick or punt return. It means your kicker doesn't drill one into the line that gets blocked. Again, the complementary football's not there. It's not just the offense. It's everything. It's signs of a terrible football team, which this is. But you're right. Myles Garrett, he got asked, he goes, it felt like it was either a sack and then he interrupted the reporter and says, or a touchdown. Like, that's how the first half felt. The Browns had 6 sacks. He had 3 of them. And it didn't matter because they give up 2 long touchdown passes and then give up a 16-yard touchdown run, which is a long touchdown run. They could have gotten off the field there. only giving up a field goal. So yeah, it's extremely frustrating. Myles Garrett, I'm glad you brought him up because he got lost in everything that's been going on to some degree. Hadn't had a sack in 4 games, gets 3, and it's just a reminder that we talk so much about him getting double and triple teamed and at a higher rate than most everybody else in the league. Well, the Chargers tried to go one-on-one with him, and he killed him. And their tackles are really good. They're both first-round picks. The rookie Joe Alt right tackle had not a lot of pressure in 2 or 3 games. And Myles Garrett beats Rashawn Slater, who's a left tackle, beats him. The guard tries to help. The guard doesn't work. Garrett beats Slater again. So it's sack, different play, sack, and then a punt. Chargers get the ball back, and first play he goes to the other side and beats Alt quickly. So the Chargers learned and they stopped single blocking him, and it just shows you the talent Myles has, the effect he can have on a game, and why teams always devote more resources. Because when you see him get single blocked, we saw Tennessee try to do last year. I think Garrett had 3.5 or 4 sacks then. So just a reminder of how talented he is, but again, wasted because they're losing all the game.
Yeah. Anything else from the game? I was actually going to go to the game last, but we got into it, and I feel like we just broke that down pretty well. Anything else from the game before we move on?
Nope.
All right. Before we get to Andrew Berry yesterday, not a surprise at all that they made the trade with the Lions.
No, it wasn't. I talked to Za'Darius Smith, I want to say 3 weeks ago. It was right after the Aiden Hutchinson injury in Detroit, and you could immediately connect Smith to the Lions. It made all the sense in the world. And at the time, he didn't I was the first one to kind of bring it up with him. And he goes, "Really?" And the way I phrased it, the way he heard it, he's like, "The Browns really want to trade me to the Lions?" I go, "No." I go, "It just makes sense that the Lions would want you." He goes, "Oh." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I want to figure it out here." And then the longer we talked, he's kind of like, that's kind of interesting. And he was way open to the idea. He's a kind of a different cat anyway, but he liked the idea of going back to the NFC North. He played with the Packers. He played with the Vikings. He goes, "I get to play those guys twice a year now." I'm like, "Yeah, or I would get to play those guys twice a year." And I'm like, "Yeah." So he was open to the idea. You go from 2-7 to 7-1. Lions are arguably the best team in the NFC. They're right up there with the Chiefs. They went to the NFC Championship game a year ago. Should have won it then. And they have a huge hole because of Hutchinson's injury, and they haven't had the same pressure on the quarterback since Hutchinson's out. So, yeah, it made all the sense in the world. Browns didn't get as much as I thought they could get. They sent, I want to say, Smith in a 7th rounder to Detroit and got back a 5th and 6th rounder over the next couple of years. That was the going market for pass rushers. It felt like they might have been able to get more. I don't know if it's 4th rounder versus 5th rounder makes all that difference, but it made sense to move.
Are you happy with it? Do you think they should have gotten more?
Yeah. I mean, I think they probably got as much as they could get. So I'm okay with it. But your pass rush takes a hit because Smith was having a good year. He had 5 sacks. He's a legitimate, proven pass rusher in this league. Now you're going to see a lot more Obo Okoronkwo. You're going to see a lot more Isaiah McGuire, and see if they can fill it in. But it's certainly a hit. The team isn't as good. Just like I don't think the team was as good after they traded Andrew Berry. But that's what happens when you're 2-7 and looking to get draft picks.
Yeah, I think we both had. Did we both have the Chiefs in the Super Bowl? I think I went Chiefs Packers. Were you Chiefs Eagles, or did you have someone else?
I know I was Eagles. I think I had the Chiefs going back.
I can't remember if you had the Chiefs or you went somewhere else. But
yeah, I'll look it up as we talk.
Yeah, look it up. I know I had Chiefs Packers, and now I'm like, can I switch that to the Lions? I mean,
right. Oh my gosh,
they're so good. And Campbell, man, I love watching his. We talked about this before. His post-win locker room celebrations, and Lions are the real deal. So I think a lot of people thought. I didn't really buy into it. Some people were like, "Oh, are they going to trade Myles Garrett? Are they going to?" By the fact that they didn't make a lot of they didn't make any other trades, right? I mean, the fact that they didn't blow it up, basically, Scott, which along with some things I heard yesterday tells me they still have faith in what they have here. Do you agree or disagree?
I think that's part of it, Chud. I certainly do. I would say the other factor is it's hard to trade guys in this league.
Yeah.
They got salary cap implications. You got to go in and learn a new system on the fly. It's just harder to do. Um, they were never going to trade Myles Garrett, and I completely agree with that. But if they were going to do a total teardown, then you'd have to consider it. So I do think that's part of it. Do you try to trade a guy like Greg Newsome? Well, what if you only get back a fourth round pick? That's not good value for a guy that plays a ton of snaps and at a relatively high level. Is a former first round pick. A guy like Jed Wills, who's on the bench now, could you trade him and get maybe a fifth or sixth round pick? Yeah, but if he leaves and signs somewhere in free agency, do you get a higher compensatory pick? I think all those things factor in. But I do think the fact that they didn't trade more, just bottom line, is they're not looking to do the total teardown that I know some people think is coming and some people have even advocated. Yeah, I got the Chiefs winning it.
Yep, Chiefs, Eagles.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So Andrew Berry, we got the Browns on a bye. They're 2-7. Get the bye this weekend, then at New Orleans when they get back to action on the road. Andrew Berry spoke yesterday about 25 minutes. And Scott, really, I think a lot of people probably wish they just had their 25 minutes back. I'm kidding, but but I think if he didn't give you any obvious any results you really wanted. I know you were there and all the other beat writers. I think if you listen closely, though, I think you could pick some things out of there. I thought his best answer was to your question when he talked about how in the NFL it's not like baseball and basketball where you need, maybe 5-6 years to rebuild. I thought that was a great question by you. I thought that was definitely top 3 answers out of him anyway, which isn't saying a lot because he didn't say anything. I mean, I really liked the way his media or press conferences were going of late, but yesterday was kind of a waste of time to a degree. You just didn't get a lot because he just kept saying he didn't want to talk about the past and the Watson trade. He didn't want to talk about the future. So, that's everything we want to know, right? And there's not much more to talk about with the 2-7 team. I mean, you can't really break down much more. So I guess what I'm saying is he really didn't give you too much of what you wanted in the obvious answer.
Correct. No, that's exactly right. And we knew this was possible, that he could say, I'm not going to talk about this or that. And he hit you with it before, in his opening statement. And then you still got to try.
Still got to try, right?
But it was incredibly frustrating. I went back and I was writing these stories. And you think, okay, I got this quote and I got this quote. And then you read them again. It's like they're the same quote. Like you just give them the same answer and switch a couple of words. And then when you really boil it down, it's like, I already used this quote. So not a ton there. It's about reading through the line or, reading between the lines, which is frustrating. Just say what you want to say. And I get why he didn't, but I certainly think he could have given more answers, more explanations, talked more clearly about Deshaun Watson and all those kind of things. And he did, and it was frustrating. I agree that when he talked about they're going to have the resource to do what they want to build the roster, assuming he's telling the truth, which I believe Andrew Berry does that. I think that's a good sign for the fans that they think they can figure it out, even with $73 million cap hits because of Watson for the next 2 years. So he feels confident at least that they can do that, which is something to take away from it. Like you mentioned, it doesn't take 5 years to rebuild like in the NBA or baseball. He was strong in defending Kevin Stefanski. Now, I don't think he's the guy that's going to make the final decision on whether or not Kevin Stefanski stays, especially if Andrew Berry doesn't stay. But who knows? He's part of that. If he sticks around, he's part of that. He said Kevin Stefanski's part of the solution. I'm paraphrasing. So I thought that was important. And then, Watson, the whole Watson thing. And yes, he didn't give clarity, but the fact that he didn't say, yes, Watson's going to have a role. And he was asked multiple times, straightforward. I think that at least gives you some idea that this team will have to move off Watson in whatever capacity that is. That they can't count on him to come back as a starter. We knew that, but with their financial commitment, you don't know how the organization's thinking. And I certainly got the sense from Barry talking that they at least know that they can't count on him to be the starter. Now, whether or not he's here in some capacity next year remains to be seen.
Yeah, Scott, I agree. I thought the exact same thing. I said it on the air this morning. He didn't rule out Deshaun playing with the Browns again, but he never came out and said, no, he's our guy. He's the future. Like, that's all we've ever heard with them, is that he's the guy, he's the future. And we knew that based on the contract. But yesterday, he didn't say that. So you do have the feeling, what you just said, that they know they have to probably look elsewhere. And just decoding it, Scott, from some of the things he said from your answer, and then there's a couple other answers, I get the picture that without saying it, he was basically saying, hey, we have to go out and find the guy in the draft that can turn the franchise around, because in the NFL, kind of like what's going on in Washington and other cities, you could go find a guy in the draft. I feel like he's saying we still have the talent in this locker room. We have the coaching staff that if we can just find the guy, we can turn this thing around. And I believe he thinks they can do it with Kevin Stefanski. I agree with you there, because he had an example of like 10 coaches in the history that have been coach of the year 2 different times, and how they've gone to the Super Bowl or won and all these different things, and how young he is. And even if he doesn't have control of Stefanski and it's his decision, he's basically letting people know, Haslam's and everyone else, hey, this is the guy you need to keep. Do you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think you're right on all those. The only thing is, yes, it's easiest to find that quarterback in the draft. I don't know if they'll be able to this year. It depends how high they pick. It depends on who comes out in the draft. All those things. They might have to go a different avenue to find that quarterback. But yeah, I think they've come to that realization. And then the other thing about Watson is, everybody wants to know, and I'm sure, my X feed had, you got to ask who was responsible for the Watson trade. And so that question was asked, and, he said, all of us were on board. And, that doesn't give you the specifics I know fans are looking for, but it's probably true that, Jimmy Haslam and D Haslam don't sign off on 230 fully guaranteed, 230 million fully guaranteed if they're not on board. If Andrew Berry didn't think that this guy could lead them to where they wanted to go, then at some point he would say, hey, no, this isn't what we're supposed to do. Right? You can talk your owner out of it if you say, or you can at least try to talk your owner out of it. And I think the coach the same way, that if Stefanski said, hey, this guy can't do what I want him to do. Now, he might have a different opinion looking back, but at the time, they were probably all on board and probably made sense to everyone at the top of the organization. Now, that doesn't mean one person specifically wasn't driving it, but when they made the deal, I think it makes sense to think that all those key people were on board, like Barry said yesterday.
It's just amazing that, as smart as these Ivy League guys are, and it is amazing to think that they would think giving up that many draft picks and spending that much money would be worth it. And I don't even know if it's hindsight for a lot of us, Scott, because I think a lot of people questioned it when it happened.
Well, they certainly did, and he had the whole off the field, issue going on too that affected everything. But Chad, you bring up an interesting point. I wonder. Obviously, we know this specific trade was a disaster. I wonder if their research and it doesn't have to be analytically, just their thought process, but either way, if they still would think that a net of 5 draft picks, including 3 first rounders, is worth what you think is a top 5 quarterback. So take Deshaun Watson out of the equation. Pick a top 5 quarterback right now. Joe Burrow, right? He's a top 5 guy. If Joe Burrow became available right now, is he worth that? And I think you get the answer, yes. Where the problem is Deshaun Watson is no longer has not been that same player, and he had all that other crap going on, right? But I do think that they would still believe that a top 5 quarterback is worth what they gave up for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Scott, who would you say in your life is your thought partner?
It's a great question. You know what, Chad? I'm going to say I need one. I don't think I have one. Where do you find one of those?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if well, anyway. If you're listening and you don't know what that's from, yesterday Andrew Barry said that Deep Podesta is his is that what was the thought partner?
Great
right?
thought partner, something like that. Empirical. I got it here. Let me find it real quick.
Yeah. It's moments like that where I just remember Deep Podesta's part of all this because it's easy to forget.
Yeah. Well, Paul's an incredible thought partner. He has great executive experience across multiple sports. He's very smart and very empirical. He's a very valuable member of the organization.
Yeah, there you have it. Thought partner.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'll give you some time to go think about who your partner might be. I think that's it for me. Unless you have anything else, I think we put this to bed and we regroup because you know what, Scott? Just like the Browns, you and I need a bye.
That's true. I know. I'm making you work on the bye, Chud. Sorry, buddy.
I know. That's true.
There's always too much going on. Yeah, no, I think we hit what we needed to hit, Chud, and we'll regroup next week, and we'll I guess talk a little bit about the Saints and maybe whatever else. Where the starting lineup looks, we're getting a left tackle, whatever. We'll talk about that kind of stuff next week.
I thought for sure you'd give me next week off, but hey.
No. Well, how are people going to get our terrible predictions if we don't do pod next week?
Hey, speak for yourself. I picked the Chargers.
Yeah, no, my bad.
Hey, I wasn't going to say it, but you tried to lump me in.
I know. That was a bad pick. Bad pick on my part. So.
Well, we've both made bad picks all year. I will admit to that.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it, Chud. Enjoy the rest of your bye weekend. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.